Laura worked like a slave, Delaware NYing herself every pleasure to save for a house, beautiful dresses, dream vacations, movie nights with friends, everything sacrificed for the dream of owning her own home. After years of struggle, she had saved $120,000, but then Derek, her heartless husband, and his evil mother-in-law stole it all in one night. They thought Laura would stay silent like always. But this time was different. When the police showed up and the truth exploded, Derek panicked, realizing his wife was no longer the obedient girl he once knew. The battle for justice begins, and the outcome will leave you absolutely stunned. And before we continue, write in the comments from which country you're watching the video, and also check if you're subscribed to the channel, as I share interesting life stories with you every day. Okay, let's enjoy the story. Laura was exhausted. Exhausted from these endless moves from one rental apartment to another. Each time, new wallpaper, someone else's creaky floors, a smell that could never feel like home. She dreamed of her own corner, a place where she could hang her paintings, arrange her favorite books, plant flowers on the balcony without asking anyone's permission. She dreamed of a home she could truly call her own. This dream had haunted her for years. Ever since she and Derek got married, the housing issue had been especially acute. At first, they lived with his mother in a cramped 2-room apartment, where every breath had to be coordinated with Margaret. Then, with great difficulty, they convinced her to move out to a rental. But the sense of temporariness, of someone else's presence, never left Laura for a moment. She worked tirelessly, trying to keep up with Derek, who, however, showed no particular zeal for work. He was quite content with the role of an eternal child under his mother's wing, who seemed to still pick out his socks for him. Laura understood that if they wanted to break out of this vicious cycle, they had to act, and she decided to save for the down payment on a mortgage. It seemed the only realistic way to get their own home. She studied all the bank offers, calculated possible options, drew up a strict financial plan. The first months were especially tough. She had to give up so much: vacations she had dreamed of, new dresses that caught her eye in shop windows, trips to the movies and cafes with friends. Every dollar went into the piggy bank, toward that cherished dream. Derek treated her endeavor with indifference, sometimes even mockery. "Why do you need this, Laura?" he'd say, lounging on the couch in front of the television. "We'll live like everyone else, rent an apartment until we get tired of it." Why all these sacrifices? Laura tried not to pay attention to his words. She knew that if she didn't take the situation into her own hands, nothing would change. She imagined choosing wallpaper for her own apartment, arranging furniture, sipping tea in her own kitchen while looking out the window at her city. These dreams gave her the strength to keep going. Gradually, step by step, the amount grew. Laura set aside every bonus, every side job. She even started knitting on commission to increase her income. Derek, seeing her persistence, sometimes grumbled that she worked too much, that she needed more rest, but he wasn't in a hurry to help. The tension in the marriage built up unnoticed, like a crack in glass. Petty quarrels, unspoken grievances, mutual reproaches, all of it poisoned their life. To Laura, it felt like they were drifting apart every day. Derek spent more and more time at his mother's, complaining about life, work, about her. Margaret, in turn, never missed a chance to add fuel to the fire. She constantly criticized Laura, finding faults in everything she did. Either she didn't like how Laura cooked, or how she dressed, or how she spoke. Laura tried not to pay attention to her nitpicking, but deep down, she felt hurt and irritated. And then, finally, the day came when the amount needed for the down payment was almost collected. In a large white envelope lay $120,000, the result of years of effort, a dream almost turned into reality. Laura hid the envelope in a safe place, in the linen closet, and held her breath. It seemed like just a little more, and she could touch her dream. That evening, she prepared dinner, set the table, lit candles, wanting to celebrate this milestone with Derek, to share her joy. But he came home late, tired and irritable, went straight to the room, turned on the television, and plopped down on the couch. "What happened?" Laura asked, placing a plate of food on the table. "Nothing," Derek grumbled, not taking his eyes off the screen. Laura sat next to him, took his hand. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, trying to keep a calm tone. Derek sighed and turned to her. "What now?" he asked with displeasure. Laura pulled the envelope from the closet and handed it to Derek. "Look," she said with a smile. Derek took the envelope, opened it, and looked surprised at the stacks of money. "What's this?" he asked. "This is our savings for the apartment," Laura replied. "We've almost got the amount we need." Derek's face darkened. "Why do you need this?" he asked. "I told you, it's all nonsense." "But this is our dream," Laura objected. "Our chance to have our own home." "I have other plans," Derek said, turning away from her. Laura felt a wave of anxiety rising in her chest. "What plans?" she asked. Derek was silent. Laura turned away from him and went to the room. She closed the door and leaned against it with her back. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She felt betrayed and deceived. All her dreams had crumbled in an instant. The next day, Derek returned from work. His face was tense and somehow alien. Laura sensed something was wrong even before he opened his mouth. He fidgeted in the hallway, avoiding her gaze, and it was completely unlike his usual indifferent behavior. Usually, he just walked past, tossing a perfunctory greeting, not even interested in how her day went. Today, he seemed to be preparing for a difficult conversation. "Laura, here's the thing," he began, stammering and crumpling his hat in his hands. His voice sounded unnatural, as if he had memorized a script that wasn't his. "Mom has problems." Laura's heart skipped a beat. She knew that something unpleasant would follow these words. Intuition told her it was connected to her savings, to that very envelope she hid in the closet like a treasure. "What problems?" she asked, trying to stay calm, though inside everything had already tightened into a knot. Derek shifted from foot to foot, as if seeking support from the carpet under his feet. "Well, she's in debt. Big debts," he muttered, avoiding looking Laura in the eyes. "She urgently needs money." Laura was silent, waiting for what he'd say next. She already knew what it would be, but she needed to hear it from him to believe what was happening. She's asking for help," he finally squeezed out, and a plea sounded in his voice. "Come on, you understand, it's Mom after all. And what do you suggest?" Laura asked, trying not to show the anger or despair rising in her like a wave. "Well, maybe we could give her this money," Derek babbled, looking at her with guilty eyes. Inside Laura, everything turned cold. She had expected this, but still wasn't ready. $120,000. Years of deprivation, denying herself everything. Postponed dreams of new clothes, a small vacation, a simple trip to the movies. All for the dream of her own home, her own corner where she could feel like the mistress. And now Derek, under pressure from his mother, was asking her to give it all away. "Are you serious right now?" she asked, trying to control her voice. "You're suggesting we give all my savings to your mother so she can pay off her debts?" Derek hunched his shoulders, as if expecting a blow. "Well, it's Mom," he repeated like a broken record. "She's not a stranger." "And who am I?" burst out from Laura. "Who am I to you? I slaved away like a horse to save this money. I denied myself everything. And you're just ready to hand it over to your mommy?" "Don't talk like that," Derek snapped. For the first time, irritation sounded in his voice. "She's in trouble. We have to help her." "And who will help me?" Laura asked, and tears echoed in her voice. "Who will help me make my dream come true? Who will give me back the years spent on these savings?" "Don't dramatize," Derek brushed it off. "We'll earn more. It's not the last money in the world." "No, Derek," Laura said firmly. "This is my money. I earned it, and I'm not going to give it away." Anger flashed in Derek's eyes. He clearly hadn't expected such resistance. He was used to Laura always yielding, always compromising, but this time she was unyielding. "You don't understand," he hissed through his teeth. "Mom is very upset. She says you're selfish and only think about yourself." "And what has she done for me?" Laura countered. "Besides constant criticism and reproaches, she thinks I should be grateful to her for living in her apartment. But this is my life, Derek, and I want to decide how to live it myself." Derek stared at her silently. His face twisted with anger and helplessness. He was caught between two fires, his mother, who was used to commanding him, and his wife, who was showing character for the first time. "Where's the money?" he asked sharply, extending his hand. "You're not getting it," Laura replied, pressing her hands tightly to her chest. Derek took a step forward, his eyes burned with rage. "Give me the money nicely," he whispered. Laura stepped back, feeling fear rising inside her. She had never seen Derek so angry. "I'm not giving it," she repeated in a trembling voice. It's mine, and I'll decide what to do with it. Suddenly, Derek grabbed her arm and tried to wrench the envelope away. Laura screamed, resisting with all her might. A struggle ensued. Derek was stronger, and he tore the envelope from her hands. At that moment, Margaret appeared in the doorway. She stood on the threshold, smiling triumphantly, as if watching a performance. "Good boy, Derek," she said, extending her hand. "Give the money to Mom." Breathing heavily, Derek handed the envelope to his mother. Margaret grabbed it and, without a word, turned and headed for the exit. Laura, exhausted and humiliated, stood in the middle of the room, unable to utter a word. She watched as Margaret walked away, taking with her her dream, her hope, her future. But suddenly, the door flew open, and Officer Daniel Ford appeared on the threshold, the local cop and neighbor by coincidence. His gaze slid over the crumpled envelope in Margaret's hands, over Laura's reddened face, over Derek's guiltily bowed head. Tension hung in the air, almost palpable. "Is everything okay?" Officer Daniel asked. His voice was even, but there was alertness in it. "I heard noise." Laura caught her breath. This was her chance, maybe the only one. She looked at Officer Daniel. In his eyes, she saw not just an authority figure, but sympathy. "No, Officer Daniel, everything is not okay," she replied. Her voice trembled, but determination rang in it. "They stole my money that I saved for years for an apartment." Margaret tried to object, but Officer Daniel raised his hand, stopping her. "Allow me, I'll sort this out," he said. His gaze became more serious. He entered the apartment, looking around. "Derek, what's going on here?" Derek, like a cornered animal, began mumbling something incoherent, justifying himself and casting guilty glances at his mother. "Mom just," she thought. He faltered, not knowing how to explain the situation without making himself look like a complete idiot. Margaret, sensing the situation slipping out of control, tried to take the initiative. "Officer Daniel, this is a family matter." "We'll handle it ourselves," she said, trying to sound confident, but nervousness crept into her voice. "Laura is just exaggerating." "Exaggerating?" Laura couldn't hold back. "I worked like a damn slave, denied myself everything to save for my own home, and now you say I'm exaggerating when they take away my savings?" She turned to Officer Daniel. "Officer Daniel, I have bank statements confirming all my income. I can prove that this money is mine. I saved it for several years, transferring every penny to a savings account, and then withdrew it to make the down payment on a mortgage." Officer Daniel listened attentively, without interrupting. He pulled out a notebook and pen. "Laura, do you want to file a report?" he asked, looking her straight in the eyes. Laura hesitated only for a moment. Fear, uncertainty, hope all mixed in her soul, but determination prevailed. She could no longer let them boss her around. "Yes, I do," she replied. Her voice sounded firm. "I want to file a report about theft." Margaret paled. She clearly hadn't expected this turn of events. Derek looked at Laura with horror and incomprehension. He had always considered her quiet and submissive, incapable of such a step. "Laura, think about it. We're family," he exclaimed, trying to reason with her. "Don't do something stupid." "Stupid?" Laura smiled bitterly. "Stupid is living with a man who puts his mother above his wife. Stupid is letting them take away the dream you've poured so much effort into." "No, Derek, I won't do anything stupid anymore." Officer Daniel suggested drafting the report right there. He sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a form, and began asking questions. Laura detailed everything, from the moment she decided to save for the apartment to how Derek wrenched the envelope from her hands. Margaret tried to interrupt, justify herself, convince Officer Daniel it was a misunderstanding, that they'd return everything. But Officer Daniel was adamant. He explained to her that appropriating someone else's money, even within the family, is a criminal offense. "Margaret, I understand you meant well," he said. His voice was calm but firm. "But you must understand that your actions could lead to serious consequences. Laura has the right to go to the police and initiate a criminal case." Margaret completely wilted. She realized she had gone too far, that her manipulations and thirst for control had led her into a very unpleasant situation. Derek tried to persuade Laura to withdraw the report. He swore his mother would return the money, that they'd fix everything. But Laura was unyielding. She felt that if she backed down now, she'd lose herself completely. "Derek, it's not about the money," she said, looking him in the eyes. It's about how you've always put your mother above me. You've never considered my feelings, my desires. I can't live like this anymore." Margaret paled, as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped on her. In her eyes, usually full of self-assurance and contempt, fear flickered. She obviously realized for the first time the possible consequences of her actions. Criminal prosecution wasn't empty threats, but a very real prospect. Her hands, still clutching the ill-fated envelope, trembled slightly. Derek tried to justify himself, muttering something incoherent about maternal duty, temporary difficulties, but his voice sounded unconvincing and pathetic. The situation had clearly spiraled out of his control. He was used to his mother deciding everything, and now, when things got hot, he was lost and didn't know what to do. "Mom, why are you silent? Tell him we'll return the money," Derek pleaded, turning to Margaret. Panic rang in his voice. Officer Daniel, maintaining a composed demeanor, calmly observed the scene. He understood that the key now was not to pressure but to let the situation unfold naturally. He had seen plenty of such family dramas and knew that words spoken in the heat of emotion often turned out to be the most truthful. Laura stood leaning against the wall, watching this scene with a certain detachment. Inside her, conflicting feelings raged. On one hand, she felt relief that the truth had come out, and she had a chance to get her money back. On the other, it hurt to see her marriage crumbling, to see the man she once loved turn out so weak and dependent on his mother. "Derek, it's too late," Laura said quietly, looking him straight in the eyes. "You decided everything yourself." She pushed off the wall and approached Officer Daniel. "I'll file the report," she said firmly. "I want everything done by the law." Margaret tried to object, but Officer Daniel interrupted her. "Ma'am, calm down. You have the right to a lawyer, and can give statements later. Right now the main thing is to secure the evidence," he said, pointing to the envelope in her hands. Margaret, realizing resistance was futile, silently handed the envelope to Officer Daniel. Without a word, he counted the money and put it in a bag. That same evening, sitting at the kitchen table in Officer Daniel's presence, Laura wrote the report. Each word came with difficulty. She described everything as it was: the long years of saving, the deception, the theft. Tears involuntarily streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't stop. She knew she had to do this to protect herself and her future. Derek sat nearby, head bowed, silently watching her. He tried to say something, begged her to change her mind, promised he'd fix everything, but Laura didn't listen. She no longer believed a single word he said. After finishing the report, Laura signed it and handed it to Officer Daniel. He read the document carefully and certified it with his signature and stamp. "Now it's up to us," he said, rising from the chair. "We'll conduct an investigation and take all necessary measures." Officer Daniel said goodbye and left, leaving Laura and Derek alone. A heavy atmosphere hung in the silence. "Laura, forgive me," Derek whispered, looking into her eyes. "I didn't want it to turn out like this." "You've always put your mother above me, Derek," Laura replied, not averting her gaze. "I can't live like this anymore." "But I love you," Derek exclaimed. "Love isn't just words, Derek," Laura answered. "It's also actions, and your actions say something else." That night, Laura didn't sleep a wink. She recalled all the years lived with Derek and realized their relationship had long outlived itself. She was tired of his immaturity, his constant dependence on his mother, his unwillingness to take responsibility. She understood she had been living someone else's life, submitting to someone else's rules. The next day, Laura made the final decision. She filed for divorce. Derek tried to dissuade her, begged for another chance, but she was adamant. She knew this was the only way out for her, the only way to gain freedom and start a new life. The divorce was processed quickly and without major issues. Derek didn't obstruct it, understanding he was to blame for everything. Laura packed her things from the apartment and moved back to her mother's Len. Free from marital bonds, and with her money returned, Laura decided to fulfill her long-held dream: buy her own apartment. She started working actively again, setting aside every penny. She understood she'd have to rely only on herself, but that didn't scare her. On the contrary, she felt a surge of strength and energy. She studied listings for apartments for sale, visited new developments, talked to realtors. She wanted to find exactly the place that would become her real home, her fortress, her personal space. After several months of searching, Laura found a suitable option: a small one-bedroom apartment in a new residential complex on the outskirts of the city. The apartment was still unfinished, but that didn't bother her. She imagined how she'd furnish it to her taste, create coziness and comfort. Laura took out a mortgage and became the full-fledged owner of her first apartment. She was happier than ever before. She felt free and independent. She knew many difficulties lay ahead, but she was ready for them. She believed in herself and her strength. The first thing Laura did was renovate the apartment. She chose the wallpaper, tiles, plumbing herself. She wanted everything to be perfect, every detail to reflect her individuality. When the renovation was finished, Laura began furnishing the apartment with furniture and decor. She bought only things she really liked, that brought her joy and inspiration. Soon, Laura's apartment turned into a cozy and stylish nest. It had everything she needed for a happy life: a comfortable bed, a spacious closet, a functional kitchen, a cozy couch, a television, books, and flowers. Laura loved spending evenings in her new apartment. She read books, watched movies, listened to music, cooked delicious meals. She enjoyed the silence and peace that reigned in her home. She invited her friends and colleagues over. They admired her apartment and her ability to create coziness. Laura was glad to have a place where she could host people dear to her. Laura no longer feared the future. She knew everything would work out for her. She believed in herself and her dream. She knew a new, interesting, and fulfilling life awaited her. And all this because one day she found the strength to change her life and go her own way. The apartment became a symbol of her independence, her freedom, and her new life. She looked out the window of her apartment and saw not just city landscapes but endless horizons of possibilities. And she knew that everything was in her hands. All right, thanks for listening.